Hi. Morning, afternoon, whatever it is for you. Let's get right into this. First, it's important to ground ourselves and get in your body. Feel, oh, there's the sun rays again. Feel your being self. If you'd like. I brought my dog. Oh, yeah. There she is. She wanted to walk today. What is it, Leah? All right, so today we're going to talk about intimacy with God, with divine love. There's so much that's been showing up and revealing itself in my heart, in my mind, in my soul. I want to, part of how I operate is just, I always want to give away what's been given to me. I want to teach other people. I want to teach you guys how to have this kind of knowing within your own self. So you're not dependent on a bunch of teachers everywhere, but actually the teachers teach you how to, I don't know, it's like that old saying, like, instead of giving someone 5 fish, teach them how to fish, then you know how to get food for yourself the rest of your life. So my natural proclivity, I don't know if it's natural, but in my life, because of the experiences that I've had and just, painful experiences that I've had to go through, and it's just, a lot of it can be existential pain, because we wanted more intimacy and more closeness than we experienced in childhood. And so my soul is on a path, and my egotism can be on a path too, of trying to find answers, because it always wants answers, and I don't want to teach myself or anybody else how to go about this in a neurotic way where, if you've seen my videos, I don't often show my books, but I have the whole side of my garage is lined with books, and I have my doctorate, and I have studied and studied and studied ancient books, modern books, I don't know, all sorts of books, because I wanted understanding. I want wisdom. And I have this high conscious where I don't want to lead people astray, but I also don't want to limit myself by old beliefs and old ideas and just limited thinking, because people think we have to think in a certain box. If you think of, they say inventors, invent most of their most incredible things or whatever by the age of like 23 or something, because their brains are still like the childlike state, open and not fixed in their thinking. They can still be imaginative. So I don't want age to be a factor in my mind being open and imaginative and going into higher consciousness places. And so, sometimes that makes me open to things that are, I'm trying to get the background, hold on. That, have been disturbing or really thrown me off, because I just don't know what to make of certain things that I've experienced, But the brain always, the mind, the ego mind always wants to define everything. And, definitions can be helpful, but I never want to be confined by that. If they are helpful, then yes, it's important to use them. I was, the only honors class I was in was organic chemistry. I loved chemistry, and I got an A in it in college. And so I love being analytical and understanding how things work, and understanding how, for me, it was relationships. That's why I loved chemistry so much, because it was how different chemicals relate with each other, and how they can get closer to each other, and what repels them. And it's funny, because it was like reading People magazine back then or something. Reading a magazine about who's in a relationship with who or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, let's go back to intimacy with God, because I try to make my videos timeless. That's just where I feel called to make them, because I feel like the deep philosophical questions that we have are more pressing than whatever's going on in the immediate. Or not more pressing, like the immediate is pressing in most people's lives, but these deeper questions are what I keep coming back to. And so I like spending my time trying to understand them and answer them. And so if you look at, but what I was going to say is there's seasons, and there are seasons that we go through, and there's a time right now that is bringing this stuff up in me, and let's see how to communicate it. It's like there's seasons in the church calendar, and if you look at that as just a vehicle, you don't have to believe in any kind of same church or anything or religion as I do or anything. I really try to teach in a universal way. But if you watch the life of Christ as a path of consciousness, let's say, as a path of your higher consciousness, as a path of what does it mean to be born as a king in a stable, and then the miracles that happened, and the teachings, and then the death and the resurrection and ascension. You don't have to know all of these mysteries. Don't worry about any of them right now, but I'm bringing up this one of Epiphany, which means Christ revealing himself. And so here, I'll show you. I was feeling this the other day, is just what I have to give to you, to give back to the world, is my own experience. It's just my own witness of how I'm understanding consciousness, and I'm understanding our spiritual path, and understanding, yes, I've been a psychologist for over 20 years. But that's just part of my profession, and this is my being. And as a psychologist, I am a studier. That's what I am. I'm a researcher of truth. I'm a researcher of how do people operate? What is love? What is the spiritual path? I've been a spiritual psychologist all these years. I went to a graduate school that integrated theology and psychology. Ology just means the study of. Psyche is your soul, and theos is God. So I studied God, and I studied your soul in, school settings. But I also just study this in myself. And so, listen, if you want to explore these things with me. But what I bring to you also, I'm part Cherokee Indian. So I visited with Indians, and I got Indian teaching as well. And if you want to call it that, I feel like, we're all souls made out of God. So when you get quiet, you have access to all of this knowing everywhere. But there are people that have forgotten that. Most of us have. Or perhaps people, I don't ever want to encourage paranoia, because it just takes us down a weird path, but that don't want us to remember this. But I'll just let it go. Like, it doesn't matter what they want or don't want. You can choose now. Do you want this higher knowing, and do you want to have access to it? If so, then begin to learn how to be comfortable in your own being self. You are a soul in a human body, is what George MacDonald reminds us. He writes a book called At the Back of the North Wind. If you ever want to read something that can help you get more in touch with your soul self. Narnia books are like a lighter version of George MacDonald. Madeleine Ellingle, the woman who wrote A Wrinkle in Time, I met her, I took a writing course with her. She said that the best thing about C.S. Lewis was that he introduced her to George MacDonald. And so I have a whole series on here where I read through The Princess and the Goblin. I forgot about that. On my YouTube channel, wherever you're seeing this video. But that talks about your spiritual path and how to trust your spiritual path more. I wish we all trusted our spiritual path more, but our egotism wants to define things, and wants to label things, and wants to quantify things and control things. So Epiphany is about Christ revealing himself. He shows up for the Jews and the Gentiles. That's the whole world. He shows up, and I was thinking about vibrations, and how we're all in different frequencies, and like a tuning of a radio, and what is around you what shows up in your reality is often what's resonating with something that's going internally inside. Anyway, one thing I was thinking about or contemplating yesterday was this idea that it's so interesting that the shepherds saw the angels, and the shepherds first saw, besides Mary seeing and knowing Christ in her and other things like that, the shepherds were the first to come visit, and And I was looking at, no wonder, because Christ is said to be the good shepherd, who shepherds our souls, who leads us like on these rocky paths, who will help us to understand the deeper nature of reality and what our soul's path is, as you allow Christ, or open up to let Christ reveal. Christ means anointed. So Jesus, the Christ, the anointed one, the God-man, both divine and human. However, I'm not particular about how you understand this right now. I'm not going to get in debates about theology or anything like that, or try to convince anyone of anything. I'm a witness to my own experience, and that's just what I'm choosing to do here. And if it can help bring more love into your life, and more understanding, and more peace, more clarity, more joy, more welcoming of your being self, of welcoming all the like a more loving path to unfold in your life. That's what I want in my life. And so that's what I teach. That's what I have. I heard a priest once say, he's like, I have Christ. That's who I have in my heart. And that's what I teach. If you want something else, then go somewhere else, but the Christ I have in me is this deep, deep mystic Christ. And I go into the unknowing. I go into dark places. Thank God, yesterday I come across a quote, and I want to remind myself to get back to the shepherds. I came across a quote from St. John of the Cross, and I really resonate with St. John of the Cross, and he was around the time of St. Teresa of Avila. And Carolyn Miss writes a book. She wrote a book called Sacred Castle or something, The Interior Castle. Well, because Teresa of Avila wrote one, and it talks about all these different deep pathways and of going into your interior self. But the quote yesterday from St. John of the Cross that I came across was, if you want to know that you're on the spiritual path, then be willing to be blind and walk in the darkness and be led. It was something like that. Maybe I can put it in the description if I need to or no, but that's what's been coming to me over and over and over lately, is my unwillingness before to actually surrender and let myself be led. I keep having to do that over and over and over. Not having to, I'm invited to do it on deeper and deeper levels. And the other day I just was crying because it was so scary, and I didn't realize that I was scared of Christ's rejection. I was scared to let him lead. I do a meditation every day. And, even in my meditation, even when you're just surrendered and you're sitting in presence, interacting with, I'm assigned very brief passages to just sit and be with Christ in. But I can go off and I can be reading a commentary and I can get in my mind and I can do all sorts of other things. But this time I was like, all right, where do you want to lead? What? I'll just be here. I'll be here. It's fine. I don't have to direct this. And I do it for an hour, and believe me, it's painful in a psychological way. I mean, sometimes it's joyous and ecstatic and amazing and like mind blown over and over again, because you're just in this being state and you feel love. And sometimes it's just darkness, because you go in what's Saint Ignatius of Loyola says, consolations and desolations. And so you can be in a constellation and you feel really connected to the divine, and then you can go in desolation and everything's dark and just like, what was I feeling? What was that knowing? You'll go and read parts that you wrote in your journal and you're like, what was that? What was that state of being? And then, you can try to run after that. Or this time I was just present and I was noticing, I was observing that I wasn't going forward more in intimacy with Christ because I was holding myself back, because I was projecting and imagining that I was going to be rejected. And so it's so interesting because last night I came across this video on YouTube, and the man was talking about these two different women who were who didn't want to let the guys know that they were dating, how much they liked them or something, because they were afraid of rejection. So much in life that we're missing because we're afraid of rejection. I don't want to miss any part of life. I don't want, like, my fear of rejection can be there, but I don't care about it. Like, I cannot be invested in it. Like, I don't want my fear of rejection to keep me from more intimacy with divine love, with God, with Christ, with, with my own self, with my own soul. I don't want to hold myself back and stay in this place of not knowing who I am because I'm afraid I'll be rejected. It's like, who are you? That's the other question to ask, is who are you? If we are a soul in this body, having this experience, who is this soul of you? And what is this other part of you that, says, I'll explain it this way for a second. I watched a show on one of those streaming things, and I won't say the name of the show right now just because I'm making an effort to make this timeless, but it's the show is about a woman who was an orphan who is a chess genius, who knows how to play chess. And I watched the whole thing and I loved it. I love the psychological dynamics of it all, and the loneliness and the path that she's looking for and she's finding, and the path of facing her own inner demons, and the path of not giving in to addiction and not letting her fear of life, not going into the paths that will numb her and dominate her, which is addictions, but hold on. I didn't bring my Kleenex today. Let's see. There. But on that, when I watched some of the behind the scenes yesterday, gosh, so much happened yesterday. It's so weird. And it felt like such a chill day. So, but when I was watching that, the actress that was playing this woman was saying how, and that just costume designer was talking about how they were noticing this character like kept trying to find her own version of cool, of being cool, and what does it look like, and for a little while she looks like this, and for a little while she looks like this, and she also got addicted to winning. She had to win her chess games or else where was her worth, and probably just the intellectual high that you get from winning those as well, you know, from solving problems. Our egotism always wants to solve problems. This could be part of the reason I'm making this. I'm not going to analyze every aspect of why I'm making this video, you know. If I'm trying to find my own cool, like, I don't really care about that right now. Otherwise, I wouldn't dare to put the songs that I put out there without being more talented or more skilled at the guitar or whatever. I'm expressing consciousness. I'm expressing what I'm seeing in the world and how to keep navigating and finding a deeper path to life and our meaning and joy in all of that. And I put the skating because I'm in that flow state and that chill vibe. I put roller skating out there because that's what I'm doing in my life. And before that, I was hiking here every day, you know, and I still hike here some days. But lately I've been skating a lot, and skating and music and even being in the spirit, in your soul, is this flow, you know. It's like if I was Pele, then I would be playing magical soccer, you know. Oh, the Pele movie was out a few years back, but it's so good. The Jenga. And Bob Marley, like, I love Bob Marley because he said all of his music is speaking about a higher consciousness, and he's teaching that, and he was in it at the same time, and he was wanting to connect with the divine and be present with the divine and be present with love and be passionate about life. And these are all the aspects, you know. And listen, I'm in this thing right now for the first 21 days of January. So I don't want to date this, but I've been doing this other thing, and I was so inspired because the teacher in that was like, he's like, we are learning how to be in this vibe, you know. He just speaks the things that I know in scripture in a different way, you know. But I love what he was saying. I was so encouraged. He says, we don't shy away from going into our shadow. We don't hide from looking at these different aspects of ourselves. We don't spiritual bypass, you know, which is run off into a bunch of spiritual things so that you can just try to feel like spiritual ego. But anyway, I don't want to digress too much. So let's go back to the shepherds for a second, because I was like, oh, the shepherds, they know this experience of taking care of sheep, of being silent at night, of watching over their flock, of leading them to grass and to water, and of just being in nature a lot, being in this quiet state, the Zen state, you know, in your being self. And so, no wonder they're going to be the ones that see Christ first. You know, they hear from the angels and are told. And it was from, you know, a sermon that I heard yesterday that they were talking about, you know, the Magi came from the east. The Magi knew. They were Gentiles. They were non-Jews. Okay, so Gentiles is just this. So they had a knowing to follow the star, and they went to Herod the king and they said, where is the Messiah, the anointed one, you know, the God-man meant to be born? And they were like, what are you talking about? And all of the scholars of that time were not aware that Christ was going to be born at the time. But the scholars could tell them, yes, in Bethlehem, that's what the prophets say, in Bethlehem of Judea, shall be born this. And so there were prophecies about it, but they weren't in this quiet place of knowing. They weren't looking. And why I wanted to make this video was that, and I didn't ask my son for permission, but I think it's okay because this is part of my experience, and I won't say which son. I have two. And I think I've talked about this before anyway, I'm very protective, you know. And so, but I also want to convey my own experience of life. And part of my experience was interacting with my son in this way. He was very little, and I never taught him this. I know I didn't, and no one else did. And he came to me and he said, Mom, because I was telling him about the wise men came that from the east, the kings, and how they followed a star. And it's like the Buddha, 400 years, I read somewhere, before Christ said that the Christ was going to come, going to show up. That's the epiphany time is. And why is it that the kings and scholars of that day weren't looking, but the kings from the east that studied the mystic and studied a meditation and how to be present knew that he was coming and followed the star? And what my son told me when he was little, he said, Mom, and he didn't even use the word Native Americans. He said, these people of different tribes, and he described Native Americans, like Indians. However, he said from over here, they went in their canoes, the chiefs and stuff went in their canoes, and not many, but some of the people died doing it, and they went all the way over, and they followed the star too, and went to go see the Christ, and they brought him gifts. And I'm like, I was like skeptical at the time, because I was like, what is he talking about? But I always treated my kids, and I still do, like their souls, their old souls in human bodies, and not just little kids, and he said this to me, and I said, well, what do they bring, because my ego mind's probably trying to get more answers, or I wanted him to talk more about whatever this download, I call it a download, that he was getting, and if I hadn't stopped to celebrate the mystical, and talk to him about a star leading the way for these kings, these three kings, these wise men to come from the east, because they wanted to bow down and see the Christ, and that they were born, like that the Christ manifested in physical form in their lifetime. Like, it's so incredible to think about. But so of course these Native American chiefs who are connected to the all, that it's like you read of these stories of indigenous tribes that will start climbing up a mountain, and then science will be like, oh, a tidal wave was coming in and we just found out about it. They just follow their intuition. Their intuition is connected to all things. Like, your intuition is deep and knowledgeable, and we're so much more than what we can look up on the internet. Imagine that you can look up in your soul so much more than when you can look up on the internet. I'm just tired of people limiting themselves. I don't want to limit myself. I don't want to lose my mind, of course. That was in the chess show too. She sometimes was so lonely and so intelligent in her own mind that it was like, of course, looking at sanity and trying to still be sane. And then when she'd go on like a bender and do all, the drugs and the alcohol or whatever, I don't recommend that path, but, people go and they numb themselves, and they try to find highs. If we run after ego highs, then we can have a propensity, and spiritual ego highs too, to run after them in different capacities in our lives. But it's learning how to be present, and how to not be so identified with all the pains that come up sometimes. I learned the other day, I do my meditation, which quiets my mind, but to stare at a candle for a few minutes, for 5 minutes or so, and just quiet your thoughts and let the thoughts come, but you don't give weight to them. And that way you learn how to be detached from your thoughts. You learn how to not just follow every thought that comes, every whim, and be all caught up in it as if that is yourself, or that's what you have to do now, or whatever. Just practicing. This guy was saying, if you practice that 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes at night, he's been doing it since 2012. I was just inspired by that. Like, I have my own practices that I'm led to, but even just that, and I was thinking, I always have the sun, and anyway, I can just gaze and it can be like the candle, you know, and just let the thoughts arise and let them go, and not be caught into each of them and hooked in and pulled this way and that. But anyway, so going back to all this, so going back to what my son was revealing to me as like a 4-year-old or whatever age he was, I was like, what did they bring? And he said, wood, Mom. And I'm like, why would they bring wood? You know, like, why would they go in their canoes and go this whole journey? And like, of course, the kings brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And there are spiritual symbolic messages in the gold. The gold is like what a king has. Frankincense is what an incense, a spiritual incense, like a prayer thing. And myrrh is what they put on the dead. And so it's kind of like foretelling that Christ was going to die, give up his own life, and then rise again. But there's deeper meanings and essences in the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And it's like the kings could, because they knew how to follow their intuition, could have just been intuitively told what to bring, or what to bring, you know, when God becomes man on earth, what they're each meant to bring. Who knows how it was conveyed to them to bring these things that are spiritual symbols for us and for our own consciousness and our own spiritual path in life. Leia, come here. I guess it's okay if she whines. She's just looking at stuff in nature. But so what I was going to say though is, and so I said wood. I said wood. Why? You know, and he's like, I don't know. He's like, I don't know, Mom, for his father, for the baby's father. He just said it like that. And I had totally forgotten that Jesus was a carpenter. And my son was not saying they brought wood because he was thinking in his mind, because his dad was a carpenter. You know, he worked with wood. And, but, you know, and besides this, I knew of a Native American shaman called Red Elk that I had met with for 3 days. I flew out to meet with him because I had all these questions, and I knew he was a Christian, and I was confused because, you know, so many people I've grown up with call themselves Christians and don't care at all about being aligned with Christ, you know, and walking in a true spiritual path, and open to the mystic, and open to going into this unknown, and open to really wanting to know what it is to have intimacy, and to surrender, to yield to not my will be done, but your will be done to God. And instead they just get some kind of identity from calling themselves a Christian. And I don't want to judge, like everyone can be in their own path and their own path unfolding. But I grew up with so much of that it was just like, you know, I didn't trust the people that called themselves Christians. And so the people that didn't, you know, it's like the ones that came to Christ, who could understand Christ, were not the religious leaders of that time. You know, they were sinners, and whatever you want to call it, sinners, those who were experiencing life, you know. So anyway, I called Red Elk, and Red Elk had this ability, and you don't have to believe this. This is my experience of this man, and him conveying his experience of his reality. And he said he was taught, you know, by his tribe to work the dream, that we're in God's dream. It's called Mitakuwashin. We're in the mind womb of God. And he said, work the dream, Cheryl. And that's what he was taught, is how to work the dream. And he had a deep, vivid imagination, but also he could see things very clearly in his meditative state. It's a quality I wish I had more of. Like, I'm not as much of an artist in that way, where I want to practice my visualization skills. I think it's very important on your spiritual path to be able to visualize things in your inner mind very clearly. So practicing that, even if you don't realize you've been on a spiritual path, that could be part of your spiritual path, that you have that capacity. It's a gift that is needed in this world, in my understanding. But come here, Leia. And so I called Red Elk, and he would pray and just you don't have to believe this. Go back in time to a certain, and maybe there are parallel realities, so who knows where he was going. But he wanted to verify that what my son was saying, and I wasn't calling him to tell him this. I was just calling him to tell him, hey, my son saw this and was telling me this. And we had forgotten that Joseph was a carpenter and he was saying wood and blah, blah, blah. And so he said, I'm going to contemplate this. I'm going to go and look, because he can enter into that time period. You don't have to believe this or not. Just consider it imagination if you want. But, and so he went and he verified, and he saw that indeed these Native Americans did come in their canoes, and they came over and they visited, or boats, whatever. I don't know about canoes, but boats. And they visited because they wanted to see the Christ, the incarnate God, you know? And it's part of the epiphany. So I just wanted to make this video because I want us to stop having limited thinking and think that Christ can only reveal himself in a certain way. You know, I was just on a Zoom call this morning, and they happened to bring up Christ, and they were talking about him walking on water is a symbol also of him walking in a higher consciousness. And the storm that comes up is like us listening to all these different parts of our egotism or whatever, and Christ quieting the storm and getting into our boat with us, you know? And the other day I was reading in John chapter 6. I love John because he's like the mystic disciple, you know, the beloved, like really loved, like he felt the love of Christ. And when you feel the love of Christ, you are more willing to go into this unknowing place and just trusting, like the free fall, trust fall, you know, and so John had a deep experience of being beloved by Christ, and he was the mystic one. But anyway, in John 6, it was talking about, I think it was John 6 or 5, Christ was out on the water walking. It was a different time walking on the water. I feel like it was a different time than when Peter walked out, but it said this time when they were willing to let him in the boat immediately went to the shore. And it was so cool because I'm in this quiet meditation, like, what does this mean metaphysically? What does this mean in my consciousness? What does this mean that as soon as I'm willing to let Christ in my boat, he'll take my boat to shore, you know? I don't know. I'm making this video because I want to challenge us to stop having limited thinking, stop having limits on how much love we can experience internally and give to other people and know within our own being, and how silly it is to be afraid of rejection, you know, and stop life because we're afraid of being rejected. Who cares if I'm rejected? It has nothing to do with my worth. I am a soul in a physical body, having this experience. I don't care. Like, honestly, I can learn how to stop being invested if you reject me, or if other people reject me, or whoever rejects me. Like, you know, society right now is rejecting a lot of people because you're not wearing this, or you are wearing this, or you don't care. And there's all this judgment. And I don't engage in that. I let go because I don't want to spend all my energy. I don't want to spend any of my energy judging people. And I don't want to spend my energy giving it away to people who are judging me for such superficial things. And they're being programmed. People are being programmed how to think. And I do not want to be programmed how to think. I don't want to program you guys how to think. I just want to be present and loving and watch my life unfold and be artistic in that, in my own way. Artistic meaning being in this flow state of allowing love to shine through me, and whatever knowledge or truth or challenging for you to grow into a deeper experience of life, whatever it brings to you, I welcome that. And thank you. I appreciate that you are present here with me and have let me into your life. And so thanks. Subscribe or share or whatever you want to do. I wish you so much love.